Ladies and gentlemen, you can't ask for loyalty with a selfish heart. That's the truth people don't like to hear, because it forces them to look inward, not outward. Everybody wants someone who stands by them. Through the fire, through the pain, through betrayal, setbacks, storms, and silence. But what they forget is that loyalty is a mirror. It reflects what you give, not just what you demand. You can't stand on a broken foundation and expect others to build a palace of trust around you. Loyalty isn't begged for, it's earned, and too many people want royalty treatment with peasant behavior. Let's be honest, most folks don't want loyalty. They want obedience. They want someone who never questions them, never checks them, never says, "You were wrong." That's not loyalty. That's silence, and silence can be a form of betrayal too. A loyal friend is one who calls you out when you're slipping, but still stays beside you while you clean up. A selfish heart doesn't understand that. A selfish heart hears correction and calls it criticism. A selfish heart turns accountability into attack, and when you live like that, loyalty dies in your hands even if someone was ready to give it all. The worst kind of betrayal isn't when others leave you. It's when they stay and slowly lose respect for you because your actions never match your words. That's what a selfish heart does. It makes promises it never plans to keep. It makes loyalty one-sided. You want people to be there when you're down, but where were you when they cried in silence? You want folks to answer on the first ring, but how many missed calls from them did you ignore? You want unconditional support, but gave conditions every time they needed you. You want loyalty on demand, but you disappear during their storms. The real ones, the loyal ones, they watch quietly. They give chances. They wait, but they are not blind. They see the patterns. They see when it's always about you. They feel when their presence is only appreciated when it benefits you. And eventually, they stop calling. Not because they stopped caring, but because they started choosing themselves. You can't pour poison into the well and complain when the water tastes bitter. A selfish heart contaminates connection. It turns friendship into performance. It creates imbalance, where one gives and the other takes, until there's nothing left but emptiness dressed as a relationship. You may think you're strong because you don't need anyone, but strength isn't measured by solitude. It's measured by how many people can trust you with their vulnerability. How many people feel safe in your presence? How many can say, "I know they'll show up"? Not because you owe them, but because you care. And care doesn't come from ego. Care doesn't grow in a selfish heart. That heart pushes people away and wonders why it's always alone. Loyalty can't survive in a place where only one person's needs matter. You can't ask for loyalty when you've never been willing to give it back without strings attached. Being real is not a license to be reckless. Being genuine doesn't give you permission to disregard responsibility or ignore the impact your actions have on those around you. Authenticity is meant to be a beacon of truth, a commitment to living honestly and transparently. Yet when untempered, it can quickly morph into a tool for impulsive behaviors that cause collateral damage. The essence of true realness lies not in the wild abandon of every thought that crosses your mind, but in the mindful choice of when to speak and when to hold back. Genuine living is about understanding that every word you utter and every action you take carries a weight, a ripple effect that reaches far beyond the moment, affecting relationships, trust, and the fabric of your community. It is one thing to shed facades and reveal your true self, but it is entirely another to use that raw truth as a shield for recklessness. Genuine expression requires discipline, a careful balance between honest revelation and the measured consideration of others' feelings and circumstances. In striving for authenticity, one must learn that unfiltered truth can sometimes cut deeper than intended. There is a dangerous allure in the idea of being completely transparent without the filter of empathy. However, this so-called realness can easily slip into reckless abandon when it fails to account for the delicate nature of human vulnerability. True authenticity respects the boundaries that define healthy interaction. It recognizes that being real is not about relinquishing all control over your impulses. Instead, it is an exercise in responsibility, a steadfast commitment to acknowledging your flaws and strengths alike, while considering the consequences of each moment of honesty. When you let go of restraint in the name of authenticity, you risk igniting wounds that may never fully heal, undermining the trust that is the cornerstone of lasting connections. There is power in being real, but that power is not meant to be wielded without thought. The same raw energy that can drive remarkable breakthroughs and candid conversations can also lead to harsh judgments and unforgiving consequences if expressed recklessly. Being genuine demands that you weigh your words as carefully as you weigh your actions, understanding that impulsivity may provide immediate catharsis, but often leaves lasting scars. It requires you to recognize that vulnerability is not a free pass for carelessness. Rather, it is an invitation to act with consideration, to temper the intensity of your truths with the sensitivity of your context. Authenticity, when infused with mindfulness, transforms into an art form that fosters respect and understanding, rather than a blunt instrument of destruction. When you decide to be real, you are choosing to inhabit a space where truth and responsibility coexist. It becomes essential to remember that the journey toward genuine expression is not marked by the absence of filters, but by the careful selection of when and how to use them in order to serve not just yourself, but everyone around you. Friendship dies in places where pride lives. Pride is subtle. It doesn't always come dressed in arrogance or loud declarations. Sometimes it shows up as silence when you should have spoken. Sometimes it shows up as distance when you should have reached out. Pride tells you that making the first move means you're weak, that saying "I miss you" makes you desperate, that forgiving someone makes you a fool. And so, instead of healing the wound, pride builds a wall. A wall between people who once laughed together, stood by each other, shared their truths, and fought side by side when the world turned cold. When pride moves in, love moves out. It clogs the space where empathy should flow. You start measuring relationships like scoreboards: who called last, who gave more, who apologized first. Pride makes you a judge in a courtroom that friendship was never meant to be tried in. Because real friendship isn't about keeping count. It's about keeping faith. But pride turns every act of vulnerability into a risk. It whispers, "Don't reach out, they should." It convinces you that holding the upper hand matters more than holding on to someone you care about. Pride creates a cycle. You get hurt, but instead of addressing it, you retreat. You expect them to notice, expect them to chase, and when they don't, you resent them. All the while, they're thinking the same thing. Two people waiting on each other, both drowning in silence, both too proud to admit they miss what used to be. That's how friendships die, not with an explosion, but with unspoken feelings, unsent messages, and unreleased apologies. The heart breaks quietly under the weight of what could have been said but never was. Pride also thrives in the moments where ego overrules empathy, when you care more about being right than being kind, when you'd rather prove a point than preserve the bond. You say things just to win an argument, not realizing the damage you're doing in the process. You forget that friendship isn't about dominance, it's about understanding. It's not about standing taller, but standing together. And when pride becomes your compass, you navigate relationships with a direction that leads only to loneliness. Even in conflict, pride won't let you see your part. It blinds you to the harm you've caused, making it easy to blame the other person for everything. It turns "I was wrong" into a mountain too high to climb. But real connection lives in those three words. That's where trust grows back. That's where walls crumble. That's where people return. But as long as pride is louder than love, louder than humility, louder than the desire to fix what's broken, friendships will continue to die slow death, quiet, cold, and preventable. The tragedy is not just losing a friend, it's losing someone who was willing to stay. If only pride had let you open the door, the reason you're alone might be you. That's not a comfortable truth, but comfort is rarely where growth lies. It's easier to point fingers outward, to say people changed, people betrayed, people left. But sometimes people didn't walk away because they were fake. Sometimes they walked away because the version of you they stayed for didn't show up anymore. Maybe you became difficult to talk to. Maybe you made everything about you. Maybe your energy became heavy, not because you were going through something, but because you stopped caring how your behavior affected the room you walked into. Sometimes it's not abandonment, it's exhaustion, not from your pain, but from your refusal to look in the mirror and take ownership of your part. The hardest relationships to hold are the ones where one person refuses to evolve. When every conversation turns into defense, when accountability feels like an attack, when the phrase "that's just how I am" becomes a wall no one can climb over, people get tired of walking on eggshells. They get tired of not being heard, of being there for someone who never checks in on them. They get tired of being treated like an audience instead of a friend. And over time, without announcement, without fanfare, they leave. Aloneness doesn't always come from betrayal. It can be born from entitlement, from believing people owe you space in their life no matter how little effort you give in return. Relationships are not one-sided shelters. You can't just arrive with your needs and unload them without ever asking what the other person is carrying. If you never ask how someone's doing, if you never show up unless you're in crisis, if you vanish when they need support but expect full presence when you call them, eventually they learn. They learn that love with you comes with conditions. They learn that closeness with you comes at the cost of their own peace. You might say you don't need anyone, and that may be true. But there's a difference between independence and emotional unavailability. There's a difference between being strong and being unwilling to connect. People want to be around those who can give and receive, who can say sorry, who can laugh at themselves, who can be vulnerable without turning every moment into a lesson or a performance. But if all you offer is silence when they reach out, coldness when they open up, and criticism when they show weakness, why would they stay? You may feel like no one understands you, but understanding begins with you being willing to let people in. If every door they knock on is locked, if every step they take closer is met with resistance, eventually they'll stop trying. And when you look around and see no one left, it won't be because they didn't care. It will be because you didn't let them, because you were too guarded, too reactive, too afraid to show the parts of you that needed healing.